Hi everyone, and welcome to a new video. You might have noticed that it has been a while since I uploaded something new. This was mainly due to time constraints following a job change, which has reduced my flexibility to focus on my YouTube channel. Nevertheless, in this video I am back, and I'm revisiting the topic of running macOS in a virtual machine on a Windows-based PC. I did cover this topic in one of my last videos, but there were some open issues. The main two things which I saw in the comments was that first, the explained steps were not working on AMD-based systems, even with some modifications to the VMX file, and number two, it was not possible to log in with your Apple ID in macOS on the virtual machine. By getting myself an AMD-based machine to play around, combined with lots of testing and patience, I managed to find a solution for both of these issues, with an additional advantage that the whole installation procedure is a lot simpler now as well. As was the case with the previous video, my goal is still to not use any pre-made images or ISO files for installation, but rather the original unmodified Apple-provided files and the lack of a need for another macOS-based system, which kind of defeats the whole purpose, of course. As a starting point for this video, I will again use my 12th generation Intel NUC running on Windows 11. This machine is equipped with an Intel Core i7-1260p and 32GB of RAM. Lower specifications should work as well, but do keep in mind that running a recent version of macOS in a virtual machine does eat up quite some resources. Just like the previous time, let me start by explaining the high-level steps which we will go to. We will start with some preparation work and download some tools and files which we will need for the rest of the process. For each of these, I will provide the link in the description. Once we have our hands on the tools and they are all installed, the next step is to download the Sequoia basesystem.dmg file. That DMG image will then be converted to a VMDK file, which can be used in VMware Workstation. This will be the image that we boot to start the Sequoia installation in the virtual machine. Next, we will use a package called OC4VM to create a virtual machine for macOS from a template. In step 5, we will finally boot that virtual machine and run through the macOS installation. Once the installation is complete, we'll already have a working system, but in the remaining steps, I will explain how to install the VMware tools, fix the issues that would prevent you from logging in with your Apple ID, and some additional steps that are required for AMD-based system. Optionally, I'll also provide the required steps to enable shared folders to easily transfer files between your Windows host and the macOS virtual machine. The big difference with the previous method is that it is no longer needed to manually create the VMX file and generate things like a machine serial. OC4VM will take care of that by providing us with a template. The same tool already contains the VMware tools as well and several scripts that will make things a lot easier. Let's get started now, and as explained, the first step is to download and prepare some tools to use during the rest of the process. I have the same links that I have in this text file here in the description of the video. First one is to install Python 3. So copy the link, paste it in your browser, and click on Download Python. Once downloaded, navigate to your Downloads folder and run through the installer. Next piece of software which we need is QEMU for Windows. Same as for Python, copy the link that I provided in your browser and click here to download the latest stable release. Once QEMU is downloaded, again, go to the Downloads folder and click yourself through the installer. Third piece of software that we need is VMware Workstation. Here again, we need to copy the link and paste it in our browser. As you can see, the Broadcom website will ask you to log in first. So, in case you don't have a login yet, click on Login on the right top and then click Register to create an account. Once you have an active account, log in to Broadcom's website using the link which I provided. If all goes well, this should bring you to the free download of VMware Workstation Pro 17. Click on the first item in the list here, choose the latest version, and then click on the cloud item here in the list. In some cases, as you can see with me as well, Broadcom will ask you to provide additional details for compliance. Simply fill in your info and continue with the process. and click the cloud icon again when you're ready. Once the package is downloaded, as with the previous two, go to your Downloads folder and click yourself through the installer of VMware Workstation in this case. The next package which we need to download is OpenCore for VMware or OC4VM. This package makes it easy to run OpenCore in a VMware-based virtual machine. OpenCore is a bootloader that is commonly used to run unsupported version of macOS on both Apple and non-Apple hardware. I did quite a bit of videos using OpenCore, for example to run the latest macOS version on obsolete Apple hardware, or for example to create a Hackintosh. By using OpenCore in our virtual machine, we have a lot more flexibility in masking virtual hardware or providing workarounds for common issues, as you will see. Here as well, we need to copy the provided link and open it in our browser. Scroll down a bit to the Assets section of the latest release and download the zip file. Finally, we'll also need OpenCore itself, as we will use some scripts it provides. So repeat the same process for the last link in the download list. In our Downloads folder, let me extract the last two zip files now for convenience. Our preparation is now done, and step 2 is to download the Sequoia basesystem.dmg file. This is done by a tool called macRecovery, which is part of that OpenCore package which we just downloaded. So let's open that extracted folder and navigate to Utilities. In here, you can find a folder called macRecovery. Right-click on that and click Open in Terminal. To download the basesystem.dmg file for the macOS version which we want to install, we need to provide a specific board ID for which this version is the latest supported version. You could look up these IDs yourself, but the OpenCore guide has a handy list of all recent versions and matching IDs. So in our case, for Sequoia, I provided the correct command in the description as well. So let's copy that command and then paste it in the Open Terminal window. This will download that file which we are looking for from Apple and saves it on a subfolder called com.apple.recovery.boot, as you can see. Unfortunately, we can't use this image directly in VMware Workstation, but the good news is that we can convert it to a format which is supported. In order to do so, we will use a tool that's part of Kuheme, which we already installed in the beginning. To do this conversion, in the command prompt, let's go to the folder where the files got downloaded. So type cd space com and then we can press tab to complete the path. By using the ls command, we can see that this is where that basesystem.dmg file was downloaded. Copy the next command from the list and paste it in the terminal window, followed by enter. After a bit of patience, the result of this command should be a new file called basesystem.vmdk. By repeating the ls command here, we can indeed see that this file is now created. Using Explorer, we can open the macRecovery folder from the OpenCore utilities and browse to that com.apple.recovery.boot folder to see the same files as well. Up to the next step. In here, we will create the VMware virtual machine by using a template provided in the OC4VM package. To do so, minimize the folder which has our basesystem.vmdk file, as we will need it later, and open a new Explorer window to your Downloads folder. Go to the extracted OC4VM folder and navigate to the VMware folder in there. Here you can see two subfolders, one called Intel, which we will need when running on an Intel-based system, like we have here, and another one called AMD, which, as you can guess, is what you need when you're running on an AMD-based system. So I will right-click and copy the Intel folder. If you have an AMD-based system, do the same, but for the AMD folder. Then I will go to Documents, Virtual Machines. This is the default location for virtual machines in VMware Workstation, but any other location should do as well. Here, I will paste the earlier copied Intel folder and I will rename it to macOS. Inside this folder, we can find a prepared VMDK file called macOS, which is where we will eventually install macOS. We also have a macOS VMX file, which is already properly prepared, and a second VMDK file which contains OpenCore and the required files in order to boot OpenCore in the virtual machine. In this folder, we are still missing the installation media for macOS itself. So reopen that minimized folder that contains the earlier created and converted basesystem.dmg file and copy or move that file into this macOS folder as well. Time to start VMware Workstation now. From here, click File, Open, and navigate to the folder where you created the virtual machine and open the macOS VMX file in there. Once opened in VMware Workstation, click on Edit Virtual Machine Settings to change this VM's configuration. The default memory is set to 8 GB, which should be sufficient, but as I have the resources, I will increase this to 16 GB instead. Same for the CPU, which is set to 2 cores by default, but I will change it to 4. In the rest of the configuration, we can see the virtual hard disks, corresponding to the VMDK files in that macOS folder. The first one is opencore.vmdk, from which we will boot OpenCore. The next one is that macOS.vmdk file, which has been pre-configured to 128 GB, so if you want to see this different, you will need to remove and re-add the larger or smaller drive to the VM. 128 GB should be pretty good, so I will leave it as is. We will also need to link the downloaded and converted basesystem.dmg file to this virtual machine, as that is what we will use to do the macOS installation from. So click on Add, select hard disk as hardware type, leave the interface as SATA, and choose to use an existing virtual disk. Click Browse and select basesystem.dmg, which should be in the same folder as we just copied it. When asked to convert this image, just keep the existing format. All done here, so let's click OK to save these settings. And then finally, we can click on Power On Virtual Machine. If all goes well, this should boot OpenCore in the virtual machine. OpenCore can only find one bootable drive, which is that base system which we created that has macOS recovery. So after pressing Enter or a bit of waiting, the virtual machine should boot into macOS recovery for Sequoia. All seems to go well, so let's select the preferred language first. In recovery, in case you would have recreated or edited that macOS.vmdk file, you will first need to go through disk utility to properly initialize it. If you left the drive as it came with OC4VM, like I did, you can immediately continue by choosing Reinstall macOS Sequoia here. Click Continue, and this can take some time. Then accept the license terms. And then select Macintosh HD or the name which you gave to the virtual drive in disk utility and click on Continue. Right now is a good moment to get some coffee, as this will really take some time. Fortunately, to my experience, the estimated time which you see here is rather pessimistic, and you will probably be done a lot faster. As we can see in Task Manager, macOS recovery in the virtual machine is now downloading all required files for macOS Sequoia, which is quite large. After some time, you will see that the required files are all downloaded and the installer will then shift to unpacking and installing them. In my case, the download section itself took roughly 15 minutes, but this is heavily depending on your internet connection speed. During the second phase, we can see now that the CPU load and disk utilization gets a lot higher, which definitely makes sense. Roughly about 7 minutes later, we can see that our virtual machine reboots and continues with the next step in the installation. Finally, after another 15 minutes or so, you should see the Select Your Country or Region dialog. This is exactly the same as you would see on a real Mac after a fresh installation. Now select your country or region and continue to answer the rest of the questions here. For now, you should skip logging into an Apple account. And in the final step, preferably choose to not automatically update, as that could potentially break your virtual machine in the future. There we go. We have a working version of macOS Sequoia running in a virtual machine on Windows already. If we take a look at about this Mac, we can see that OpenCore pretends that we're running on a Mac Mini actually. We do have macOS 15.5 in a working state, and the response is not too bad, but performance, among some other things, can still be improved by installing the VMware tools. Luckily for us, the OC4VM provided OpenCore VMDK file contains a copy of the VMware tools ISO. You can find it by opening Finder, selecting the OpenCore drive on the left here, then navigate to OC4VM, ISO. Simply double-click the darwin.iso file to mount it. Now double-click on Install VMware Tools and follow through the installation wizard. It will ask for your user's password and request some additional permissions. Due to the security settings, the system extension which the tools try to install is blocked. So click on Open System Settings and allow the extension to be loaded. When asked, don't restart the system yet, as the installation always seems to fail on the first time, even when allowing the system extension to be installed. To overcome this, just rerun the same install VMware tools and go through the same steps another time. This time, the installation should work as expected. To complete it now, we need to restart our virtual machine. While the operating system boots, you might see some weird graphical output, but this is to be expected as the VMware tools are adjusting the resolution to the size of the window for a much nicer experience. Back in macOS, everything still looks the same at first glance except for the resolution, but you will probably notice straight away that everything feels a lot more smooth in comparison with before. Since we have the VMware Tools extension loaded now, we can also change the resolution to something else, which was not possible before. You can either drag and resize the size of the VMware Workstation window, or if you want to set a specific resolution, open a terminal window and type the following command, which you can also find in the description. The values at the end here can be adjusted to the horizontal and vertical resolution of your choice, of course. Now, after entering our user's password, you can see that this is configured as requested. Let's cover the topic of the broken Apple ID login now. So, in this state, as was the case with the previous video's installation method as well, when trying to log in with your Apple ID, for example through the App Store, you get to see the following message. To correct this, we need to hide the fact that we are running in a virtual machine to macOS. This can be done by a kernel extension called VMHide, which, fortunately, is already part of the OC4VM boot drive and can easily be enabled by running a small script. This script can be found in the OpenCore drive, OC4VM, Tools folder, as you can see here. To use it, let's open a terminal window by going to Applications, Utilities, Terminal. Let me make this a bit bigger, then type cd and drag that tools folder in the terminal window. We can see that this is indeed where we can find the VMHide script. To run it, we need to type /vmhide -on and press enter. In the output, we can see that this is now enabled. For this to be in effect, we need to perform a reboot of the machine, so let's do that once more. When we're back in macOS, let's repeat the same steps as I just did before enabling VMHide by trying to log in with my Apple ID from the App Store. And as you can see, after putting my password, I do get to enter a verification code that was sent to another Apple device, and I'm able to log in without any issues. And to make a simple test, let me try to install something from the App Store like WhatsApp, for example. This seems to work perfectly fine now, if you ask me. Alright, in case you have run through this procedure on an AMD-based system, apart from copying another template folder from OC4VM in the beginning, you have followed exactly the same steps until now. Now, to optimize performance with an AMD-based system, there is a need to run an additional script to set the correct amount of virtual CPUs correctly. To show you this and to test if running all of this on an AMD-based machine actually works, I repeated everything on my AMD Ryzen 7 based laptop. This machine is less powerful than the NUC, but it is able to run macOS pretty fine in a virtual machine as well. First, let's check how many virtual CPUs were assigned to the VM. The provided template has 2, but as I did for the Intel machine and also here for this AMD machine, as we can see in the VM settings, my virtual machine has 4 virtual cores assigned to it. Now, in the VM, as we did to work around the Apple ID login issues, open a new terminal window and then navigate in there to Open Core OC4VM Tools. You can do this either by typing the full path or again by dragging the folder to the terminal window. In here, we can see that there is a script called AMD CPU. Now, to set the correct number of cores, run the script by typing /AMD CPU space followed by the number of cores you have assigned to the VM, which is 4 in my case, and then press enter. In case you wouldn't have enabled VM hide, you can enable this now as well and combine these two together. After this, we simply again need to reboot the virtual machine to let the changes become active. That should be all it takes. Another handy feature provided by the VMware tools we installed is a shared folder. This will allow you to easily exchange files between the Windows host and macOS guest. This can be enabled in the VM settings, which you can access by going to VM, Settings in VMware Workstation. On the Options tab here, click on Shared Folder and choose for Always Enabled. Add a folder and browse to an existing folder or create a new one. Like I just did on the desktop. Then click OK to save the settings, and once again, you will never guess, we need to perform a reboot of the virtual machine to make this all active. When the VM is back from its reboot, we should be able to access the files that are put in the share folder that I created on the desktop. This allows us to share files from Windows to macOS and the other way around, from macOS to Windows. To test this, let me for example download the static Sequoia wallpaper to this folder. As you might have noticed that due to the lack of graphical acceleration in the virtual machine, the background usually fails to load or acts a bit strange. Now to access the shared folder from macOS, start Finder and click on Go Computer. In here, you can now see VMware shared folder, and after opening that, we can see the share folder with that downloaded file in there. Let me copy it locally and then set this as the wallpaper on my virtual machine. That looks a whole lot better if you ask me. If desired, you can also run the virtual machine in full screen, which makes the experience even more real if you can call it that way. In About This Mac, we can also see that since we installed the VMware tools, it is no longer showing us the 3 MB graphics as it did before. And as you could see in the video, the performance is not too bad, but definitely far from native, of course. So the use cases for this are rather limited. It allows you some great flexibility to explore macOS or to test out and repair or recover some things. And hopefully having access now to your Apple ID and also the App Store expands the list of use cases quite a bit. That was all I had for the video. Thanks a lot for watching. I hope you have enjoyed this, and if you did, I'd appreciate a thumbs up. Let me know how this process worked for you or if you have any questions in the comments. And if you like these kind of videos, make sure to subscribe to my channel and enable notifications. Thanks again and hope to see you back here soon.